Good evening, everyone. Before the start of today's session, which is a continuation of the sutra that we have begun last week, let us chant Namo Tassa together. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. So we started on a very interesting and a very sort of applicable sutra, I think, last week with regards to the importance of speech and maintaining one's speech in a manner that it does not bring conflict. And conflict is something that the Buddha has in all circumstances preached that we avoid. Even when it comes to the ordination of a bhikkhu, there are a number of questions, as you would already know, that a bhikkhu is asked, right? And if only the bhikkhu is sort of answers correctly in a manner which reflects that the bhikkhu does not have conflict in one's life, it is only then that the bhikkhu or this person is, I'm sorry, not the bhikkhu, but the person answers the questions in a way that does not show that there is conflict in the person's life. It is only then that the bhikkhuhood or the samanirship is conferred upon or given to the person who wants to ordain. This is not because of anything else other than the fact of the disturbance to the practice that conflict brings. The swaying of mind into those attributes that should be avoided. That is the reason that the Buddha, to both lay people and monk and lay, the Buddha has always preached this way of living, which is not something which would bring about conflict. So, in the sutra that we have, let me share the sutra. Can you see the sutra, everyone? Yes? Lovely. So we finished. Yes, I think we ended right here. Let me make it a bit bigger.
Bhante, yes, you'll have to expand it, I think.
Yes. Okay. Then ඇතිද?
ඇති. දැන් හොඳයි.
හරි. එහෙමනම් අපි පොඩ්ඩක් recap කරනවා නම් yes. So the Buddha, when it comes to blameless speech, the Buddha speaks about the inclinations of mind that would bring about speech that is blameworthy, which is to say, the mind is inculcated in the attraction of mundane pleasures or mundane dukkha as well, right? We must attribute for both sides. Just as much as we attach ourselves to the pleasures of the world, we at times also cling on to the dukkha elements of the world. And we know how that can happen as well. Hence, the Buddha says, when a person brings about a sense of Dhammic living into the person's life, then a person let goes of those sort of the binding prapancha-like natures that keeps on pulling one into positions where one is willing to now sacrifice one's practice, one's morality, one's everything for the sake of the mundane world, right? For that reason, the Buddha speaks about here the pursuit of pleasure, the pursuit of self-mortification, right? I think we remember now, isn't it? The Buddha then goes on to speak in praise of the Noble Eightfold Path, right? The Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path here now becoming the foundation of a being who is upon or treading upon a path which is, which the main practice then becomes letting go of what? Of the mundane world. Not altogether kramakrame, not altogether, right? But as we progress within the path of practice, we will bring about a sense or deeper elements of letting go into our life, where we will see the lightness, the profound tranquility, the calmness that it brings, right? That it brings. Now, let us carry on. Now, I must mention to you all, now when we talk about, Hari, when we talk about the Eightfold Noble Path, the Eightfold Noble Path from beginning, middle to end is praiseworthy. It is worthy of respect. It is worthy of adoration. It is worthy of anything and everything that we can give to it, right? That is what we have been saying since we were young. If we were brought up in Buddhist cultures, that is what we have said. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sandittiko Akaliko Eipasiko Opanaiko Pachatta. We've been repeating this. This is the adoration that we give. However, we as practitioners, we find now most of us, or all of us, we start from the teachings and slowly bring ourselves into vipassana, right? We struggle, we fall again and again and again and again, but we try to get ourselves up, knock off the dust off our clothes, and then start practicing again. The practice is possible in, right, not only because of mindfulness and concentration. We know the foundations of mindfulness and concentration is built upon all of these paths, without which mindfulness and concentration will not exist, right? As practitioners, something that we do is the fact that when we start meditating, when we become vipassana practitioner from samatha to vipassana, right? Api ara issara karpu deval හැල්ලුවට පත් කරනවා. ඉස්සර කරපු දේවල් අපි හැල්ලුවට පත් කරනවා. We see a lowness in what we did earlier. This is not the Dhamma, right? A teacher once said, ධර්මයේ හින්දා යම් කිසි විදියකට යම් මිනිස්සෙක් යම් දෙයක් යම් ධර්මයක් යම් සංස්කාරයක් අපි පහත් කරලා අපි යම් කිසි විදියකට ඒ සංස්කාරය ඒ දෙය කෙරෙහි යම් කිසි විදියකට අපි පිළිකුලෙන් බලනවා නම් ධර්ම ආවේගිකින් තොරව, that is not the Dharma, right? Now, what we tend to then do is, okay, I am a meditator. I am trying to reduce my sankharas. And then we look down upon the people who are still struggling with those maybe basic stages of Dhamma. But remember, now those people who are struggling, they might be on a lower pace, but they have nowhere to fall but go up. You, As a practitioner, you have all the way to fall, and you are falling. And you are falling, right? So who is at the end having the laugh? Not that person, because that person doesn't really care about you. It is you, the high-flying practitioner, who cares about that other person. That other person is struggling to sort of cultivate their practice, right? Who's having the last laugh? Maybe Mara is having the last laugh, right? This is what we do, everyone. When we learn things about the Dharma, when we know the Abhidharma, when we go into the deeper states of knowledge in terms of, what we know, api ara podi podi deval den ganan ganne naha. This is not the Dharma, right? If we do not acknowledge the fact that those bits and pieces that we did earlier is as much the Dhamma and is much the practice that allowed us to come into this stage, then if that knowledge does not come about, then we have really thoroughly mistaken the Dhamma practice, and we have held it on from a position which is not very much in line with the Dhamma, right? So realize that the Eightfold Noble Path is not right mindfulness and right concentration, right? Neither is it just the right view and right thought. It is all of the whole of the eight, right? It's the whole of the eight. Right view is as much respect worthy as right mindfulness. Right concentration is as much respect worthy as right action. We cannot, and as we already know the Abhidhamma, right? It is only in a position where all of these respective Chaitasikas representing the Eightfold Noble Path come into a harmonious balance with each other that we are able to attain Nirvana. Not that right mindfulness or right concentration is higher than the other seven, or right view is higher than the other seven. No, all eight must come into a harmonious balance. What does that say? That just proves the point that we've been speaking about, right? Respect is due to each and every part of the whole encompassing Eightfold Noble Path. There is a sutra within the Anguttara Nikaya. It is called the Nibbana Nivarana Pahana Pabbaya. Right? There is no, these sutras do not have names. Nivarana Pahana, P-A-H-A-N-A, Nivarana Pahana Vibhaṅga, right? This is a sutra, right? But more than the sutra, can you see this new screen that I'm showing you? Yeah, okay. So there are no names. There are no names. In this, it is just collections of teachings. This 16th one, right? This 16th one, I will read it to you just because we are here. I do not see bhikkhus any other thing by which non-arisen sense desire does not arise and arisen sense desire is abandoned, as much as bhikkhus a loathsome object. For one who attends appropriately to the loathsome object, bhikkhus, non-arisen sense desire do not arise, and arisen sense desire is abandoned. Now, this is something that we've sort of read. We are going to come back to this after we finish the sutra today because we have a bit of time. But the commentary to this offers a beautiful explanation to the unfairness that we direct towards all different types of practitioners in this world. Within the Atthakatha, it is said this, right? Within the Atthakatha, this is said. What is said? Bhikkhus, within this world of practice, within the teachings, within the Sangha, there are these kinds of people. Who are these kinds of people? Bhikkhus, There are these kinds of people who, during their time within the practice as bhikkhus, they are unable to come into a position or to commit themselves into meditation. However, they commit themselves into vata, right? Vata means it can be what Venerable Ananda did, right? In taking care of the Buddha, which is a vata. It can be all the bhikkhus who commit their time into cleaning the monasteries, taking care of the sangha, all of those things. Vatavat, Sinhale. Vatavat. වතාවත් කිරීමට වතාවත් සම්පූර්ණ කිරීමට තමන්ගේ ඒ භික්ෂුව තමන්ගේ සොයම් කාලය යොදන්නේ වතාවත් සම්පූර්ණ කරන්න. එවැනි භික්ෂුවත් කාලයගේ ඇවෑමෙන් තමන්ගේ ඇතුලාන්තයේ තිබෙන නීවරණ ධර්ම තවදුරටත් ප්‍රහාරණය කරලා යම් කිසි දවසක නිවනට පත්වෙනවා කියලා වතාවත් මාර්ගයෙන් නිවනට පත්වෙනවා කියන දේ බුදු රජාණන් වහන්සේ දේශනා කළා. Right? Because of what? Duties, responsibilities and duties. There is another type of bhikkhu. He engages in the study of Dhamma. Having engaged in the study of Dhamma, the study of Dhamma itself helps the bhikkhu to suppress his defilements. One fine day, in having learned the Dhamma, he teaches the Dhamma. There are two. Dharmya inganagana, iganagatte dharmeng, anis minusunta kiyat dena. Because of those two, the Buddha says, the bhikkhu continues to suppress his nivaranas. And one fine day will attain nirvana owing to the suppression of defilements that happened with the teaching, learning and teaching of Dharma. Right? Otukota, api bhavana karanawa wenna puluwan. Eth api dharmaya danne naha. Eth api dharmaya danagana api bhavana karanne. අපිට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී අර භාවනා විතරක් කරන කෙනාට අපිට වැරද්ද පටවන්නත් බෑ. ඉගෙන ගන්න කෙනාට වැරද්ද පටවන්නත් බෑ. උගන්නන කෙනාටත් වැරද්ද පටවන්න බෑ. උගන්නන්නෙත් නෑ, ඉගෙන ගන්නෙත් නෑ, භාවනා කරන්නෙත් නෑ, වතාවත් කර කර ඉන්නවා. ඒ වතාවත් කර කර ඉන්න මනුස්සයාටත් වැරද්ද පටවන්න බෑ. Right? තව තියෙනවා. තව මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා. Right? තව මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා. යම් භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලා ඉන්නවා. ඒ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලා විදර්ශනා ඥාන වඩන්නේ නැතුව අෂ්ට සමාපatti තුල ජීවත් වෙනවා. අෂ්ට සමාපatti වල ජීවත් වෙන අෂ්ට සමාපatti තව වර්ධනය කර කර ජීවත් වෙන භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලා ඒ අවුරුදු ගණනාවකට නීවරණ ධර්ම ඒ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලාට පාළ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. නීවරණ ධර්ම ඒ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලාට පාළ වෙන්නේ නැති හේතුවෙන් යම්කිසි කාලයක විදර්ශනාවේ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලාට පාළ වෙලා ඊට පස්සේ නිවන් දකිනවා. ඔතකොට විදර්ශනාව කරන්නේ නැති භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේට ඒත් අෂ්ට සමාපත්තියේ ජීවත් වෙන භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලාට වැරද්ද පටවන්න බෑ. යම්කිසි භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේ නමක් ඉන්නවා අනිත් දේවල් එක දෙයක්වත් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඒත් විදර්ශනාව විතරයි බලන්නේ. ඒ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේටත් අපිට වැරද්ද පටවන්න බෑ. මොකද ඒ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේ නිවන් දකිනවා. යම් භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේ නමක් ඉන්නවා විදර්ශනාව වඩන්නෙත් නෑ. අෂ්ට සමාපatti වල ඒ සමාපatti ටිකක් නෑ. ඒ ධාන වඩ ජීවත් වෙනවා. ඒ හේතුවෙන් ධාන වඩන පුද්ගලයාට වුණත් අපිට වැරද්ද පටවන්න බෑ. ඔතකොට මෙතන එක පුද්ගලෙක් ඉන්නවනම් අපිට වැරද්ද පටවන්න පුළුවන්. තමන්ගේ මාර්ගයේ විතරයි තමන් ඉන්න තැන විතරයි හරි කියලා හිතන අඥාන මනුස්සයාට විතරයි අපිට වැරද්ද පටවන්න පුළුවන්. අර වතාවත් බුද්ධ ධම්ම සංඝ රත්නයේ කෙරෙහි වතාවත් කරන මිනිස්සයාට වුණත් තමන්ගේ පවුල ආදරෙන් කැපකිරීමෙන් බලාගන්න ඒ මිනිස්සයාට වුණාවත් අර විදර්ශනා ධාන ආදී අෂ්ටම සමාපatti ආදී වඩන එක් කිසිම කෙනෙක්ට වැරද්දක් අපිට පටවන්න බෑ. ඒම වැරද්දක් පැට වෙනවා නම් නිකන් හරි ඒක ඒ මිනිස්සයාගේ වැරද්දක් නෙමෙයි. අපේ ධර්මඥානය අපේ තියෙන අපේ ප්‍රැක්ටිස් එකේ තියෙන වැරද්දක් කියලා බුදු පියාණන් වහන්සේ දේශනා කරනවා. Right? So I thought I should bring that up and speak about it because this is something that we often do. Right? This is something that we often do. Because we tend to, as we prosper and progress within the path, we do not respect, we start disrespecting sometimes the smaller things or the smaller people, if I may say it in that way, right? But the thing is, assuming that something is big, small, or equal to you is only what is said in as a manyana. It is an illusion in the first place, right? Assuming that right view is more stronger or more powerful than right mindfulness is only our own ignorance, right? It is only our own ignorance. Giving into such idiot tendencies is something that we develop sankhara upon. Now we are going to go a little bit more deeper after we finish this sutra. Yes, dear.
Can you hear me, Bhante?
Yes.
Thank you. But yeah, thanks, Bhante. I think I didn't hear correctly. So all these things, if they did Bhattavatta or any one of these things, after a long time, the Buddha said they will attain Nibbana. Did you say that even if you do Ashta Samapatti, also that if you say a long time, he will realize Nibbana? Is that what you said, Bhante?
Yes.
Thank you. And by Ashta Samapatti, did you mean that the one who practices the Noble Eightfold Path and comes to some concentration? Abhinya. Right. So that's a direct knowledge, like the past births and those things. Yes. Other people's past, but those abhinyas, directly you can hear and see.
Well, yes. So this is Ashta Samapatti කිව්වම අපි Ashta Samapatti කියවම මෙන්න මෙතන අභිඥාන සහ ධ්‍යාන දෙකම තියෙනවා. රූපයන් අරූප සම්පatti දෙකම තියෙනවා. වෙනම කියනවා මේ ඒ Ashta Samapatti නෑ. ඒ ධ්‍යාන වල try කර ඉන්නවා. Right? You're trying towards dhyana. Right? So one point is you're living, enjoying Ashta Samapatti. Ashta is 8. Yes, Samapatti are the fulfillment.
Yeah.
You're enjoying them. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒකේ ඵලය විඳ ජීවත් වෙනවා. අනිත් කෙනා මේ ධ්‍යාන නෑ, Ashta Samapatti නෑ, ඒ try කර ඉන්නවා. Right? You're trying to attain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is what it means. Okay?
Yeah. So if you're fulfilling them, then you will realize Nibbana. If you're trying to...
Yes. So what it says is, යම් කිසි කාලයක සම්මා දෘෂ්ටිය පහළ වෙලා ඒ මනුස්සයා ඒ පුද්ගලයාගේ ක්‍රමයට ආකාරයට මේ නිවන කෙරෙහි ගමන් කරනවා කියන එකයි කියන්නේ. Right? නිවන කෙරෙහි ගමන් කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ. උදාහරණයක් මට්ටමින් අපි ගත්තොත් බුදුරජාණන් වහන්සේගේ කාලයේදී ජීවත් වෙන බොහෝ සංඝයා, නිවන් දැක්ක බොහෝ සංඝයා අෂ්ට සමාපත්තිලාභී. යම්කිසි ධානයක් තිබ්බා. ඒ ධාන බොහොම ඉක්මනින් ඒ භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලාට පහළ වුණා. කුමක්ද හේතුව? මොකද පෙර සංසාරේ ඒ ධාන ආදී අෂ්ට සමාපatti ආදී ඒ ප්‍රතිපදා තුල ගමන් කරපු හේතුවෙන්. Right? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bhante. That was very useful.
All right. Yes, Mala.
Bhante, when you say Vatavat, could it be your parents or an elderly relative? Anybody who's ill? Okay.
Absolutely. Anybody. ගිහි පැවිදි ඕන කෙනෙක්ට වතාවත්, ඒ කියන්නේ ස්වාමින් වහන්සේ නමක් අම්මා හෝ තාත්තා කෙරෙහි කරන වතාවත් වුණත් මේකට ඇතුල් වෙනවා. හැමදාම ගෙදර දොර, right? Even now for all of you, right, who keep a spick and span house for the sake of your family and for the sake of, all of that. ඒකත් ඇතුල් වෙනවා. Right? ඒකත් ඇතුල් වෙනවා. මොකද ඕකට උදාහරණයක් දෙනවා මේම. මේ ලෝකේ ඒ කියන්නේ බුද්ධ කාලයේදී පහළ වෙනවා ගොඩාක් බ්‍රහ්ම ලෝකේ ඉන සත්වයෝ බුද්ධ ශාසනයෙන් පැවිදි සැපය ලැබලා නිවන් දකින්න බ්‍රහ්ම ලෝකයෙන් මනුෂ්‍ය ලෝකෙට එනවා. හරි බ්‍රහ්ම ලෝකයෙන් මනුෂ්‍ය ලෝකෙට. බ්‍රහ්ම ලෝකයෙන් එන මිනිස්සුන්ට ඔක්කොමට OCD තියෙනවා. Right? I mean, it is a fact. I mean, it's a fact. Apparently, Brahmaloking in a Minusu, they don't like their stuff touched by other people, right? So much so, right? The Bodhisattva having appeared, Bodhisattva in one of his past life, having appeared from the Brahmaloka, right? When he leaves home, before he went for his college, right? What would he do? He would tie up all of his belongings with a big cloth and tie it up in a sack to the roof of the house, right? Why? Because he didn't want his mother coming into his room, his father coming in, no one. Right? They had servants also. He didn't even want the servants coming into the room to even clean it because he would clean it. Right? Now, make අටුවාවේ කතා කරන මේ ආකාරයකට. මේක මේ තෘෂ්ණාවක් කියන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. මේක අධික අර cleanliness පිරිසුදුකමට තියෙන මේ ඇලුම. මොකද බ්‍රහ්ම ලෝකේ අර අපිරිසුදු දේවල් නැහැ. Right? ඒක අටුවාවේ විස්තර කරනවා. What is the reason for that? Right? So that is why in the Vatavat, the Buddha realized that there were certain bhikkhus of that same stature who had come from the Brahmaloka and these places, and these beings, their inclination is such. Right? Their inclination is such. So just imagine for a person who comes from the Brahmaloka who wants this sort of OCD, like, the cleanliness, when you're living in a monastery with 5,000 odd bhikkhus, obviously he would want to clean, right? And you do find these characters, where they love cleaning, right? You find them in every monastery that one would go to, right? The Buddha says, let them clean. Let that be their practice. Let them mindfully clean, right? Because cleaning itself is a very therapeutic manner, right? To sort of calm the mind. Till you're looking at Sudanta. Are you telling him to clean?
No, just the opposite, Bhante, because Sudanta loves to keep his big hand. So I always say you don't need to have it so big, so it's just the opposite. Bhante, did you say that it's not only a monk who does Vatavat? If we look after our parents or we keep something clean or look after our children, that we also have that benefit of must we be a monk?
Absolutely, absolutely. So all of those, even looking after your annoying children, right? Although you might think that it might not be, it's not as feeble and sort of careless as, it's not as a feeble person as your old mother and father, but even for a mother looking after the young child or whatnot, even that, or your teenage or overgrown children, even that is a part of the Vatavat. යම් කිසි විදියකට යම් ආකාරයෙන් උපකාරයක් වෙනවා නම් ඒ වතාවතක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. All right. So let us come back to the sutra. Right? Let us come back to the sutra. Okay. Now, then the sutra went into the teaching of the Dhamma. Right? Teaching of the Dhamma, meaning how, this is not to say that the only conversation that you have to be sort of having is Dhammic, no, is not to be preaching the Dhamma. This is to say to speak in a manner where you do not apportion blame to any related party. Why? Because that apportioning of blame can one day find itself back to you and bite you when you least expect it, disrupting your life, disrupting your practice. Right? So then how does the Buddha say to conduct your speech? In a way that you do not apportion blame, but in a way that you are talking about a dharma. ධර්මයක් මනුස්ස ධර්මයක් ඒ විදියට අපි කතා කරන්න පුරුදු වීම. That falls under what? That is the meaning of teaching only Dhamma. This is not to say about, this is not talk about preaching or just engaging in sort of preaching of Dhamma. This means to speak in a manner that we do not apportion blame, in a way that we speak about human nature rather than individual flaw. Right? Now, moving on to what we have to come to today. Right? Pursuing joy within. Now, the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Now, what is the pursuing of joy within? The 5 chords of sense pleasure. You should know how to discern prajna, joy. And knowing what joy is, you should pursue joy within yourself. So it is said, in what connection is this said? Because there are these 5 chords of sensual pleasure. What are the 5? Forms cognized by the eye, sounds cognized by the ear, smells cognized by the nose, tastes cognized by the tongue, touch cognized by the body. Now, cognized by the body. This is what or how we have cultivated self. This is how we apply and reapply tanha to the pancha, the 5 aggregates, right? To the 5 aggregates. In a person who seeks pleasure from the outside world, meaning how? Cognized by the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. ධර්මයන්ගෙන් ඒ පිනවීම පදනම් කරාගෙන ඒ සතුටක් හටගන්නවන ඒ සතුට පදනම් කරාගෙන ජීවත් වෙනවා නම් ඒ ආකාරයට ජීවත් වෙන මනුස්සය හැමදාම වැටෙනවා. Right? So, coming back to, right? So, coming back to, sorry, yes. So, then what? Dung-like pleasure. I'll read the task. Toucher is cognized by the body. That is desirable, agreeable, pleasurable, lovable, connected with sensual desire, arousing lust, because these are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Because these are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Now, right, going back to the Nivarana Prahana, right? Now that, yes, Dil, do you want to ask something?
Okay. You know, I brought this out before. So because the words used are different in this as well as in a comprehensive manual of Dhamma. So we learned there that first thing, we learned piti sukha, and piti was always joy or rapture and sukha was happiness. Yes. But here joy is the sukha, which is happiness, which is from the body.
Yeah.
So just to, because otherwise you get very confused, because my mind goes to what we have studied and think that joy. This is the sukha that cancels the nivarana of ill will. Yes. So I just want to say, because the other thing that is normally joy in our book is zest, and that one I think cancels cancels no, yeah. So their zest is the one that it cancels how do you remember that? Yeah, sukha is the one that, sorry, sukha in the body cancels restlessness and worry, which is uddacha kukucha. But that's the happiness that here they call it joy. But zest, which is in our book, zest and piti, that's the one that cancels ill will, which is one of the hindrances. So they're quite different, but we can get confused if you remember that. Thank you, Bhante.
All right. Thank you, Dil, for bringing that up. Right. Going into now, those are යම්කිසි නීවරණයක් අපේ ජීවිතය තුළ අපේ ආධ්‍යාත්මික ජීවිතය තුළ හටගන්නව නම් අපේ මනස තව කෙලෙසින් තව වපුරන ඒ නීවරණ සියල්ලම හටගන්නේ මේ අරමුණු එකක් හරි ඒ එකකට වැඩි හරි ඒ වෙලාවේ ආවර්ෂණය කරා ගැනීම. Right? ඔතකොට අපි මොන විදියකට මොන ආකාරයකටද දැන් මේ නීවරණ අත්හරින්නේ? අපි දන්නවා සමත භාවනාවෙන් නීවරණ ප්‍රහාරණය කිරීමක් සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ, යටපත් වීමක් විතරයි සිදු වෙන්නේ. ඔතකොට විදර්ශනා භාවනා මාර්ගයේ අනුව විදර්ශනා භාවනා මාර්ගයෙන් අපිට විදර්ශනා භාවනා කරන්න තව වැටහෙන්නේ අනිත්‍යභාවය, දුක්ඛභාවය, අනාත්මභාවය. අනිත්‍ය දුක්ඛ අනාත්මය කියන මේ වචනේ පරිසමාපට්ඨ අර්ථයෙන්ම අපි ගත්තොත් ඒ වචනය පදනම් කරාගෙන යම්කිසි සංස්කාරයක් හටගන්නවා නම් ඒ සංස්කාරික ධර්මය සෝමනස්ස වෙන්න පුළුවන්, දෝමනස්ස වෙන්න පුළුවන්, අදෝමනස්ස අසෝමනස්ස උපේක්ෂාව what's the word? අදුක්ඛම සුඛ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. It can be somana, it can be a good pleasurable one, it can be not so pleasurable one, it can be something which is adukkama sukha. Meaning sanskarika dharmayak somanassa padanamba, domanassa padanamba, adukkama sukaya padanam karagan hataganna puluwan වාතාවරණය තියෙනවා. ඔතකොට විදර්ශනාව අනුව අපි මේ සසරින් එතර වන්නට අපි මේ කරන මේ බැහැ වේසය අපි තව සංස්කාරික ධර්මයන් අපි හදනවා නම් ඔතකොට එතනට මොනවද අපි කියන්නේ? What are we doing then? ඔතකොට now let us see what this sutra says. It says something beautiful. I do not see, bhikkhus, any other thing by which non-arisen sense desires arises, and arisen sense desires multiplies and proliferates, as much as bhikkhus an agreeable object, ekane somanas, beautiful, right? Hunda, lassana, rasavat, object or aramunak, for one who attends inappropriately to the agreeable object, right? Inappropriately, right? Ayonisamanasikare, right? Ayonisamanasikare sukha arumunak api avarshana kara ganima. Because non-arisen sense desire arises and it leads to the multiplication and the proliferation of arisen sense desire. Then what is inappropriate? That's the question here. What is the inappropriate cognizing of a beautiful or a repulsive object? Api, let us take a beautiful object first. If we are working towards Nibbana, the way that we cognize the object should be aligned with Vipassana. That is when it would be appropriate. vidarshanaava, what is that vipassana? Or how does that contemplation occur? When we look at, for example, impermanent suffering non-self, this is the base wisdom, or this is the source of wisdom that arises in terms or in line with the object or what it should arise. However, when we say, or when we have a mundane interpretation of anicca, dukkha, anattma, which we do, by the way, right? We all have mundane interpretations of anicca, dukkha, anattma up until we don't, right? These may api arthakatane karana akara ape me ආත්මය කියන දේ තවදුරටත් ශක්තිමත් කරනවා නම් ඒ විදර්ශනාවද? It can't be, right? ආත්මය තව අපේ ශක්තිමත් කරනවා නම් ඒ විදර්ශනාව. It cannot be, right? ඔතකොට යම්කිසි ආකාරයකින් මේ ආත්මය තවදුරටත් යටපත් කිරීමට හෝ ප්‍රහාණය කිරීමට යම්කිසි දත්තයක් avashya venawa nan, or if it becomes useful, then that is vipassana, right? The sanskaras have to weaken the hold of the kilesas, right? How does the sanskaras now weaken or dampen the hold of the kilesas? It is in seeing, not applying the fact of a mundane sanskara to create another sanskara. It is in seeing the true nature of something within that object. The true nature of something within that object. What is a something? Something that sort of gives us the experience of impermanent suffering non-self, but tava dattyak api ekata apply karanava. This is me being a Buddhist, or this is what the Buddha taught. That creates another sanskara. Right? That creates another sanskara. That sanskara might be pleasurable. It might give you some sort of happiness, or it might give you some sort of dosa, or it might be sort of upekha. However, it is at the end of the day another sanskara. මේ සංස්කාරයන් ටික යටපත් හෝ විනාශයට පත් කරන්න යම්කිසි විදිහකට ක්‍රමවේදයක් අපි යොදවනවා විනා මේ ආත්මය තව අපේ මේ චිත්තසංතානය තුල වපුරන්න අපි කටයුතු කරනවා නම් ඒ විදර්ශනාව නෙමෙයි. Right? So what is here? The meditation, the simple act of closing your eyes and observing the breath without any sort of need to control the breath, to manipulate the breath, to simply just be within the present and forget about who you are. Whether you're Jack or Jill, Tom, Dick or Harry, it does not matter. You simply let go of that whole complex and simply observing the arising and the passing away of the breath. And what you see, the fact that I clung on to this, I'm trying to control this, but there is nothing to control here. I think this is me breathing, but this mechanism operates even when I'm not controlling it. It is when I can't control it, I wonder whether it will arise, whether it will continue, whether I will have difficulty breathing. Then arises that dukkha, anattma, the impermanence. It is those aspects are what then breaks down those complexes even more, not the simple applying of what we think because we know so much, not the simple applying, this is impermanent, this is impermanent, this is suffering, this is suffering. Right? There is a time when that scope gives us something. But as we progress, as we learn to simply observe, we must mature with that and realize that it is in seeing behind those words. What? Because those words mean so much to us. because we have been inculcated, we have grown up with these words. These words are nothing new to us. The Sinhala language, which is our mother tongue, has these words in them. We use them. So these words, when we use, for example, dukkha, right? Dukkha has such a negative connotation to the word that we have looked, or we look beyond, or rather we only look within the four corners of the mundane meaning of the word. Ekama tamai atmaya kiyanne. Do you understand? The mere fact that we are conditioned to think and assume dukkha is this, and we cannot see, or we do not just open our minds up to the possibility of what dukkha is through meditative experience itself, is Atma. Right? The moment that veil sheds, drops down with regard to impermanence, what is impermanent? Hari, moment to moment, but what more? Right? The moment that we sort of shed the understanding, just simply shed it, that it is just ativenama, or shed the understanding that this is dukkha, meka thamai, me suffering, just the meaning of the word. The moment that we shed it, we open ourselves to the possibilities of those deeper insights that arise. Right? That is where appropriate and inappropriate stands. Appropriate, inappropriate in one way, further proliferating whatever aspects of the being that has kept you within this samsara. Appropriate when we are able to drop that veil of understanding wholly conditioned by self and the four corners of your mind, where now you will be able to see beyond that, to allow these gushing insights to simply flow. The opening of your mind, right? That is what we are aiming at, even to the simple. The simple, it might seem simple, but takes us a long time to do, even through simply not controlling the breath and just being able to observe the breath, is that first step. It is so important to be able to master the ability to observe the breath without controlling it. So very important. Because that is the way that we observe the mind, its hindrances, its floods, its cankers, its anusayas, vitikamas, pariuttanas, and all the whole shebang of being and the composition of being, without our ego attachment being there. It starts with the ability to observe the breath without me getting involved in something which I do not need to be involved in the first place. Yeah. Now, coming back to our sutta. All right. The dung-like pleasure. Dung-like pleasure. Yes, dear.
Sorry, this is why some meditation teachers tell you that when you come to do vipassana, that you have to leave behind all the knowledge that you have and open your mind to infinite possibilities, to go pierce through the veil, to see what they always say, to see behind the words. Because we have our own thing, okay, the summer comes and then autumn comes and or whatever, this is pain and this is pleasure. So because we are in this three-dimensional world, we are very conditioned with our own things, and I might think something is delicious, you might think something is. So we have these connotations of what somanasa, domanasa, and adukkha is. But actually, to be able to put aside the ego thinking mind, so the more that we are learned, the more that we have, gone into a lot of things, it becomes more difficult, because when you see something, you have all these thoughts that proliferate one thing to another. To have that innocence of a child to watch something without all these barrage of things. And I mean, constantly, a lot of the meditation teachers tell you that. And in fact, when you come and answer, they chase you out, and you try to bring deep Dhamma in, because that's not the practice of this. What you're saying is that the simpler your mind, the ability to see what unfolds as opposed to the thought, it becomes more difficult when you are carrying a whole mass of things in. Would you agree, Bhante?
I agree. I also believe that it is a skill.
Yes.
Right now, for example, when I started, right, I was studying, right? I was studying, meaning when I became a monk, I was already studying the Dhamma, and then I went into the meditation monastery. Right now, at the time of meditation, this arose. The teacher told me, don't bring all of these things in. The teacher was very learned in the Tripitaka himself, right? So it made sense coming from a person who knows rather than a person who doesn't know. And the teacher said, look, at this time, release your mind, right? Do not try to apply all of these things. See it for yourself, right? Ehi pasiko, right? Right?
Yeah.
He himself did say Ehi pasiko, right? And that is what we are doing here, right?
Yeah.
And for that moment, right? For that moment, if we are able to just simply just let it go, leave all of these things that we know just aside, that is a skill.
Yeah.
Right? It is a skill. Without which, now, for example, just imagine that you are a qualified, let's say, a behavioral therapist or a behavioral scientist or a cognitive analyst or, something like that, with behaviors, cognitive structures and procedures and, all of these things, right? Where you are able to sort of read people so so well. And, think of just coming or being a mother or a father and coming into your, going home every day and reading your husband and your brother and your children and all of that. Just imagine, right, how stressful it would be. So what would you do? Even as a doctor, I would assume that you sort of, you develop the ability to leave it aside, forget that you're a doctor, and just simply sit down for dinner. Isn't it? That is a skill. We all must do that. We all must do that. And even in meditation, that has to be done. We leave this whole heap of self to a side. Not that it might not help us, it will help us. However, we don't need to be carrying it. That's a skill.
Thank you, Bhante. Excellent.
Yeah. Okay. Now, dung like pleasure. Dung like pleasure. Now, the physical joy and the mental pleasure, right? Sukha somanassa has been translated as mental pleasure, that arise dependent on the 5 chords of pleasure are called sense pleasure, a dung of pleasure, a pleasure of the crowd, an ignoble pleasure. This pleasure should not be pursued. It should not be cultivated. It should not be developed. It should be feared, I say. Now, as a practitioner, what we learn, right, in coming in to the practice is the more that you let go, the more that you get, right? And that is completely, absolutely true. When you don't need something, you are inundated, your life is inundated with it, right? When you're not desperately sort of running behind things, you find that you are in a position of pleasure and joy. And that is the truth, right? That is the truth. Pursuing these things, these pleasures that are low, there is this story, a Jataka story, right? Where the Bodhisattva is a head of a clan of monkeys, right? I don't know which type of monkeys. No, they were monkeys, right? Small ones. So the monkeys. And at the time, during this time, it was a very noble society. And very noble society, meaning, humans are very noble creatures who are respected for their intellect and wisdom and higher intellect and being, right? So the monkeys, the Bodhisattva in the Jataka tales, it says that time to time the monkeys would visit the town nearby and learn from the doings of man, right? And then the leader would come back to the clan and then sort of say, okay, this is what the humans are doing, this is what we sort of should follow, and blah blah blah, right? And I'm sorry for saying blah blah blah. So you get the gist. And so then, that time of year or whatnot came about, and the monkeys were all excited. It is time to go and visit the humans. So it is only the clan leader, the Bodhisattva, who goes. And I think I related this story to you earlier. But so the clan leader, the Bodhisattva, he goes to where, whilst the rest of the clan remains, and the Bodhisattva sees, the humans sort of adorning themselves. They're so sort of, he sees something that he has not seen before, where the humans are so engorged with the beautifying of the body, right? With the beautifying of the body. And this was a shock to the monkeys, because this was not something that they had seen before in the humans, because humans apparently acted with far more intellect, not in a way that they would sort of, not care about their bodies, but that wasn't the main thing in their lives. The monkey or the Bodhisattva saw that now adorning and the decoration of the body has become the main thing, right? And he is, the Bodhisattva, the monkey, the chief, is flustered. And he, with deep regret of what he had seen, goes back, and he is very regretful, and he doesn't even want to tell the rest of the clan what he has witnessed. But the clan bothers him. The clan is like, oh, come on, spill the beans. We are waiting, we are excited. What have you learned? What have you learned? And the Bodhisattva is like, it's okay. You don't push me. I don't want to say, and finally the Bodhisattva says, oh, it is very unfortunate, the sights that I have seen. The humans have now sort of given way to the pleasures, where the pleasures are held with such esteem that is all they seem to be doing, to adorn and decorate the body, to beautify the body, and this is their main focus in life, right? That is the main thing, the main focus in life, right? It is not in doing it. It is when it becomes the main thing in our lives. How, for example, food is like the main thing in a way, isn't it? Food has such a main position in our life, right? It is very enjoyable. It is something that brings people together and all of that. But when that becomes the main thing in our life, we are now playing with fire, right? And I mean, when people have addictions, for example, like sugar-induced like cirrhosis, and people addicted to sugar, and all of these things, you find people acting like absolute children when it comes to things that they are addicted to, right? I mean, even now we find men who drink every single day, people who drink every single day, still fighting over a bottle when this person is going to be drinking tomorrow as well, right? They will beat, they will make a whole sort of disaster of the event just for the bottle, just for the drink, right? You see, right? Now for us, sometimes when we live like level-headed lives, we do not see these things. When our company is a bit more sort of filtered through, we do not see these things, but when we go deeper into sort of, associate a wide array of people, we realize, my gosh, this is what the Buddha spoke about, isn't it? When people are so deluded by their sense pleasures that they forget everything. right? They forget everything. That position, right? Dung-like pleasure. Ara pilikul. May even with the things that we eat, these lowly pleasures that arise and pass away, arise and pass away, does not last long. It is only good for a moment. All of these things, we run behind all of these things that are impermanent from beginning, middle to end, right? Only up here, manusyo vela, we can sort of dig out diamonds and all of that, but we sort of get stuck with the pebbles. Right? Get stuck with, what am I feeling right now? That is what, when a person is so gung-ho about discomfort right now, any person who is so gung-ho about what is I need pleasure now, I need pleasure now. If we were all like that, none of us would have finished school. Isn't it? None of us would have put the effort, right, to go through the difficulties of life to arrive at positions that are difficult to arrive to. Right? If we were so gung-ho about the pleasure of the moment, which most people are, by the way, right, we would never meditate, because we would be fearful of the difficulty and challenge. Right? That is what it says. When a person is so attached to this pleasure of this moment, we do not make the sacrifice, we are not willing to make the sacrifices necessary to arrive at positions of mind that are far more pleasurable and elite in comparison. How? We do not make the sacrifices required, necessary. If we are so caught up in something as low, temporary, and fragile as a sense of pleasure, how are we going to attain something profoundly great, so great in this whole entirety of the universe, such as Nibbana, if we are unable to sort of let go of this for that? If we are not going to let go of a piece of chocolate for a mine of gold, who is the idiot here? That's what we are speaking about. Ede apita attarinna bැයි නම් අරක අපිට හම්බ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. That is what. Dung-like pleasure. Dung-like pleasure. It's not calling pleasure dung, but dung-like pleasure. ඒ කියන්නේ සාපේක්ෂව ඇත්තට මේ සියල්ල පිළිකුල්. Right? සමාධියේ තිබෙන සැබෑ සෝමනස්ස ගතිය දැනුන මනුස්සෙක්ට මේ පොඩි කම්සප්පවල් ඇත්තටම සැප නෙමෙයි. Right? It is not. Because when you witness, even, when you go into samadhi, even for a moment, how good that feels. And then there is a moment that comes into mind, like, what the hell am I doing? When you go into a deep state of mind, you're like, what the hell am I doing? Because why? Because that pleasure in comparison is so much more greater. Something that we never feel in our mundane lives. Dung-like pleasure. Right? The 4 jhanas, everyone. The 4 jhanas. Here, bhikkhus, quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he attains and dwells in the 1st jhana, accompanied by initial application and sustained application, and with zest and joy born of solitude. Furthermore, bhikkhus, with the stilling of initial application and sustained application, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he attains and dwells in the 2nd jhana. Free from initial application, sustained application, with zest and joy born of concentration. Furthermore, bhikkhus, with the fading away of zest, he remains equanimous, mindful, and clearly knowing, and feels joy with the body. Furthermore, bhikkhus, with the abandoning of joy, abandoning of pain, and with the earlier disappearance of pleasure and displeasure, attains and dwells in the fourth jhana that is neither painful nor pleasant, and with mindfulness fully purified with equanimity. Mindfulness fully purified with equanimity. That's a beautiful way to put it, right? And that is something beautiful that we all can learn from as well. This is called the joy of renunciation. Yes, still.
This is Niramisa Sukha, isn't it?
Niramisa Sukha.
Thank
This
you.
is called the joy of renunciation, the joy of seclusion, the joy of peace, the joy of awakening. This joy should be cultivated. It should be developed. It should not be feared, right? It should not be feared. Why? Because we are so ramped up with the lowest of the low that we think that this is the only thing that we have. That we think that this is the only thing that we have. It should not be feared. It should be embraced. The practice should be embraced in a way that we are certain, that we are confident. Inspired by the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, we are willing and ready to let go. Samara velawal walata api tanhava trushnava api thina me dosaya api hitana patana vidhi akara api attarina attarina apita hitanama apita kisima deyak tama naha kiyala දැන් ඉතුරු වෙලා. ඒ දේම තමයි මේ බය කියන්නේ. ඒ බය සෝමනස සාගත බයක් නෙමෙයි. අකුසල් සාගත බයක්. Right? අකුසල් සාගත බයක්. අපිට the truth, the reality, the truth of the fact is the fact that we didn't have anything in the first place. Right? But now we have something. What is that something? The ability to face the vicissitudes, life's vicissitudes in a manner that we are not brought down by every windfall, every rainfall, every wave that comes on our shores. We finally have something. It is not to be feared. So it is in reference to this that it is said, you should know how to discern joy, and knowing what joy is, you should pursue joy within yourself. Ajjatika, insight, secret speech and strong words. You should not utter secret speech. ඒ කියන්නේ තමන්ට විතරක් දැනගන්න කීපු දෙයක්. You're the only person who's supposed to be knowing. It has been uttered to you in discretion. You should not utter strong words. යම් මනුස්සයෙගේ හිතක් රිදෙන වචන. යම් මනුස්සයෙගේ ආත්ම ගරුත්වයට යම් කිසි විදිහකට හානියක් වෙන වචන. ඒ මනුස්සයා හොඳ වෙන්න පුළුවන්, නරක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වුණාට we are not people in this world to judge anyone. Because the moment our nivaranas increase, we will be making the same mistakes as those people are. Right? So, what the Buddha says is, if we are able to, ඒ මනුස්සයාගේ කෙලෙස් වලින් යම් කිසි විදිහකට අපිට ගලවා ගන්න, අපේ වචන පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒ වෙලාවට වචන පාවිච්චි කරන්න. ඒත් ඒ විදිහ අපිට ඒක කරන්න බැරි නම් කරන්න. You have nothing to do. Right? ඒත් යම් කිසි සමාජ මේම දෙයක්ත් තියෙනවා. Right? යම් කිසි විදිහට if the society is being hurt, ඒ කියන්නේ යම් කිසි මනුස්සෙක් මනුස්ස ජනග්‍රහණයකට යම් කිසි විදිහකට හානියක් සිද්ධ වෙනවා නම් එතන බුදුහාමුදුරු කියන්නේ කටවාගෙන ඉන්න කියලා. Right? කටවාගෙන ඉන්න කියන්නේ තම කාටවත් හානියක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ මනුස්සයාට විතරයි හානිය වෙන්නේ. Right? වෙන කාටවත් හානියක් නැහැ මෙතන. Right? But if you have nothing good to say, or in a way, or words said in a way that man can turn a new leaf, then there is nothing that you can actually say that is worthy of being said. Right? Before another, in front of another person, to disgrace another person. So it is said, in what connection is it said? Here, bhikkhus, when you know the secret speech to be false or wrong, not beneficial, you should on no account utter it. When you know the secret speech to be true or right, but not beneficial, you should on no account utter it. Not beneficial. That is very important. Not beneficial. Right? See how akalika gatiya. But when you know the secret speech to be true and right and beneficial, then you may utter it. කාටවත් හානියක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ මේකෙන්. කාගේවත් නම්බුවකට හානියක් වෙන්නෙත් නැහැ. ආත්මගරුත්වයට හානියක් වෙන්නෙත් නැහැ. Knowing the time to do so at the right time. Here, bhikkhus, when you know the strong words uttered before another to be strong, false, or wrong, not beneficial, you should on no account utter them. If it is wrong, when you know the strong words uttered before another person to be right, it's correct, what you're saying is correct, but not beneficial, you should not, on no account, you should utter them. But when you know the strong words uttered before another to be true and right and beneficial, like the Buddha said, if I haven't told you, if the Sangha hasn't told you, then why are you doing it? The Buddha, very strong. When the Buddha says, for example, to Venerable Udai, the Buddha comes, asks Venerable Udai, what did you do? Right? And Udai said, oh, I did this. And then the Buddha says, did I tell you to do that? Udai said, no. Did the Sangha tell you to do that? He said, no. Then why do you do that? That is a very strong. It's very strong. Right? And the Buddha, and beneficial. Why? To break Udai. Break him in what way? To break his course of his way. Then you may utter them, knowing the time to do so. So it is in reference to this that it is said.
I can't hear anything, Bhante.
Can you hear now, Sujata?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, now I can hear. Yes, thank you, Bhante.
So it is said in reference to this that it is said, you should not utter sacred speech. You should not utter strong words before another. Before another. Only if it's beneficial and only if it is the right time. If it is true, beneficial, and it is the right time. ඒ තුන සම්පූර්ණ වෙන්නේ නැත්තම්, keep your mouth shut, basically. Right? Speaking without hurry. Speaking without hurry. You should speak without hurry, not hurriedly. So it is said. In what connection is this said? Here, bhikkhus, when you speak hurriedly, the body tires, the mind suffers, the voice suffers, and the throat becomes sore. Right? What it says is, tamantama pīdāvak. Right? The pīdāva kīna there, tava වැඩි කරනවා by saying the body tires, the mind. This is the way the Buddha speaks. The body tires, the mind suffers, the voice suffers, and the throat becomes. This is not, the Buddha is not saying in relation to avoiding a sore throat. Right? The Buddha is saying, මේ පුද්ගලයාට මේක මහා පීඩාවක්. ඇයි හයියෙන් කතා කරන්නේ? The speech of one who speaks hurriedly is unclear and hard to understand. Here, bhikkhus, when you speak unhurriedly, the body does not tire, the mind does not suffer, the voice does not suffer, and the throat is not sore. The speech of one who speaks unhurriedly is clear and easy to understand. Clear and easy to understand, right? Now, I remember the teacher at the Burmese Pirivan I used to live in, right? He was such, up to now, I have not met a more soft-spoken bhikkhu than him. He was so soft-spoken that on the first couple of days that I lived in the monastery, I could not hear him, right? But as time, as you sort of get used to it, your hearing becomes so good, right? And speaking to him, you realize you calm down. You calm down, right? He's articulate. He's a very good teacher. He's articulate, right? And you do not misunderstand what he is trying to say. When you misunderstand, when a person is speaking like a train, like sometimes I do actually, you can easily misunderstand the point that is tried, that is in what intention or what point is being made. And if the misunderstanding is something which can bring about conflict, then a person is hurt, bringing conflict into your life again. So why? Right? To speak. So the Buddha says not to speak hurriedly, because that is a reflection of your mind and that is draining to the being. Speaks in a manner unhurried, right? In a manner unhurried, conventional language. You should not cling to a local language. You should not reject standard usage. So it is said, in what connection is this said? How bhikkhus is there clinging to a local language and the rejection of the standard usage. Here, bhikkhus, in different regions, they call a bowl pati, patta, vitta, serava, daropa, pona, and pisila. So whatever they call it in such and such a region, they speak accordingly, firmly adhering to the words and insisting only this is right, everything else is wrong. This is how bhikkhus, there is clinging to a local language and rejection of standard usage. Now, with regard to this part here, no. No. And how bhikkhus, is there no clinging to a local language and no rejection of standard usage? Here, bhikkhus, in different regions, they call a bowl pati, patta, vitta, sera, daropa, pona, pisila. So whatever they call it in such and such a region, which are adhering to the words, one speaks accordingly. This is how bhikkhus, there is no clinging to a local language and no rejection of standard usage. So it is said with reference to this, that it is said, you should not cling to a local language. You should not reject standard usage. Now, this can be very easily understood by us.
I was about to say, when Sri Lankans get together in the midst of other company, they will resort to speaking in Sinhalese despite others not being able to understand.
Understand. But also, this is also there. Right now, when people from Matara say something, the people from Kandy says, no, this is the way we say it. And they make fun of the Matara people. The Matara people makes fun of those KGBs, terrorists. The terrorists from upcountry.
Very true. That's very true.
Right. And then when the Western people say, the Western province people say it, then both of them make fun of the Western province people, the uncultured ones. So yes, the Sinhala and English is also there, but within our culture and language, and some people take offense, deep offense, right? In a way that it is translated that in a way that one might see that you are being sort of upperish and classist, right? And they take offense. That is what the Buddha. So imagine in a country such as India, right, where there was such a mixture of people. I mean, 100 odd languages, right? 100 odd languages, many different practices of religion and spirituality and all of that. How much of a conflict it would have brought. And everyone very, very proud of their native tongue. Right, very, very proud. I remember when I was studying in Burma, we had monks from Assam, we had from Bangladesh, and all of these sort of tribes, and all of them all across India, Bangladesh, northern India, and all of that. They would literally get into arguments about what the right way to pronounce something was. Right, and this is so. And this is so, even because, for example, Pali pronunciation in Bangladesh is different from Northern India. Northern India pronunciation is different from the southern parts of India and the middle of India, right? Sri Lanka has an altogether different pronunciation, right? But pronunciation, and they would sort of truly quarrel about it, right? So that is yes, Dil.
Okay. Bhante, two things. This thing that we're talking about, the speech and talking true and right, slightly different, but meaning at the end of the same thing. Ajahn Sumedha always tells us that you can be right, but not true, and true, but not right. So that is, it's true in the sense that it's not false, but it's not right because it's not beneficial at the right time. Right? And he's to always say, on the other hand, sometimes you don't say the truth because it'll cause you harm. So that's why he said, though it's true but not right. The other thing I wanted to ask is, Bhante, you said something about how the Buddha broke Uday. Did you mean that he broke the mane of the person, the ego? What did you mean by broke Uday? Why did he say that?
Well, broke Uday in the manner of breaking the ego.
Ego, yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
Breaking the ego,
yeah.
Right? In a way that Uday would one day be able to.
Yeah. Thank you, Bhante. I thought that was so. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, going into the summation. Here, bhikkhus, the pursuit of pleasure of one whose happiness is connected to sense pleasure, low, vulgar, coarse, ignoble, and not beneficial, is a state of suffering. Trouble, despair, frenzy, it is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. This is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, letting go of the pursuit of pleasure of one whose happiness is connected to sense pleasure, low, vulgar, coarse, ignoble, not beneficial, is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. It is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, the pursuit of self-mortification, painful, ignoble, not beneficial, is a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, letting go of the pursuit of self-mortification, painful, ignoble, not beneficial, is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, without turning to either of these extremes, there is a middle way, awakened to by the Tathagata, that gives rise to vision, to knowledge, to peace, to direct knowledge, to awakening, to nirvana. This is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. And as such, this is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, praise and blame and failure to teach only Dhamma are a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, not praising and not blaming and teaching only Dharma is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of conflict, non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, sense pleasure, a dung of pleasure, a pleasure of the crowd, an ignoble pleasure, is a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, the joy of renunciation, the joy of seclusion, the joy of peace, the joy of awakening is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, secret speech that is false or wrong, not beneficial, is a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, secret speech that is true or right but not beneficial is a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, secret speech that is true and right and beneficial is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, strong words uttered before another that are false or wrong, not beneficial, are a state of suffering, trouble, despair, and frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, strong words uttered before another that are true and right, but not beneficial, are a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, strong words uttered before another that are true and right and beneficial are a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, speech that is spoken hurriedly is a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, speech that is spoken unhurriedly is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. Here, bhikkhus, clinging to a local language and rejecting the standard usage are a state of suffering, trouble, despair, frenzy. It is the wrong way. As such, this is a state of conflict. Here, bhikkhus, not clinging to a local language and not Rejecting standard usage is a state without suffering, without trouble, without despair, without frenzy. It is the right way. As such, this is a state of non-conflict. Therefore, bhikkhus, you should train yourself thus. We will know a state of conflict and we will know a state of non-conflict, and knowing these, we will follow the way of non-conflict. Now, bhikkhus, the householder son Subhuti is one who has followed the way of non-conflict. This is what the Blessed One said. Satisfied, the monks rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. That concludes the sutra for today. Okay, everyone?
Thank you, Bhante.
So what I wanted to say with regards to that other sutra, I made the connection already at the time of the middle part. Yeah, so I've covered that part also already.
Bhante, sorry.
Yes, Radha. Yes.
I was just thinking, this code of ethics and the speech that you just went through now should be in the school syllabuses in Sri Lanka, I think. They need it badly because they don't know how to talk for one thing. Sorry to say that because I have been in that profession. So I was thinking this is a very good thing. I don't think our educational experts know all these things at all, who prepare the syllabuses and the whatever they have to prepare for a school. So I mean, in my humble way, I feel this is not for us, but for more children, I think. The schools curriculum.
Well,
just a thought.
Well, I think it will join the long list of things that has to be added into a curriculum. But however, I think when we think that this is not for us, we must remember that we are the sort of the shepherds of those who are young, and we commit those, or we do those things in a way that the young follow, right? And the young follow as well. So and surprisingly, although this sort of ethic of sort of speech might in certain ways be obvious, it is sadly not so obvious in most tenses as well. Yeah. So all right, everyone. So this concludes today's sutta. Thank you, Sujata. And
Bhante, can I ask one thing, please?
yes.
Bhante, when you've just read this whole thing, because it's so interconnected with the whole of the Dhamma, I think it's like the gem, the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path we speak of, this equanimity we speak of, the balance. And what the sense I got when I finished this whole thing is that in life, it's that balance we need, right? So you can talk about it, as you mentioned, all these points, like you can talk the Ashtaloka Dhamma, so the pleasure and the pain and the gain and loss. At the end of it, it's not the extreme pleasure and it's not the pain, but it's the point of equanimity when you're not pressing it down way or pressing the other way. So that's the one-pointedness, and that's the point where you come, where you get Niramisa Sukha, because you're not doing what is vulgar and coarse and whatever, and the other one is just ignoble and painful. So, and there also the Buddha makes a difference, isn't it? Sensual pleasure is vulgar and coarse and low, but when he talks about having self-mortification, he only uses the word painful. The rest of it is all the same. So they are also, out of the two, that one is just painful. But if you are indulging in sensual pleasure, then of course it is vulgar and it's low and it's ignoble. So I thought that was a difference he made. But the main thing I got at the end of this, the harmonious speech, is that it's those extremes, like in the middle part, right? Every factor is important. You can't say it's the first and the second, or the second or the. And again, when you look at the vicissitudes, right? You can't take this or this, even the first sermon itself. So in life, if we have balance in everything, I think to a great extent we can fulfill lessening our suffering, because that's finally what the Buddha tried to do, to find that. And all this in beautiful ways, from different threads that you drew together, and the way you, that's what came to my mind. We lose our balance. And I know what Sujata said what you need in the curriculum, but I personally think that we, as practicing people, as adults, we need this so very, very much, because we get so uppity, when we are doing something, and when somebody doesn't do, and we said, oh, look at that, and or we say, look at how they're throwing things around, they have no respect for it. So for to remind how badly we speak, right, as adults, as practicing adults, I know for me, I learned so much, right, because you don't think before you say, right? And if you see somebody doing something, oh, look at that, he's always doing that. Or, we say that, and we know it's that. And it's not none of our business. And it's because we forget that first thing about the chitta, that it's not an object of something. It's a process. And we always think of not the Dhamma, but we always think of the person. This person is right and this person is wrong. So there itself we fall off something. So for me, this sutta was wonderful, Bhante, right? You inspired me last week, and you inspired me this week to look at my own mind, my own speech, and I found a whole lot of things that I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dil. Yes, and sort of drawing conclusion from that point which was made, the Dhamma is easily, and the Dhamma can be a blessing and it can be a curse, right? That's the truth of it, right? The Dhamma can be the greatest blessing that you have ever had, and it can also be the greatest curse that you are left with. It all depends on how you use the Dhamma, right? Some people, or because of the hindrances and because of not truly and fully understanding the extent of our actions, sometimes we may use the Dhamma in a manner where we would control, manipulate, and inflict suffering upon people through our judgments, through our short-sightedness, through our elitist behavior, and our classist behavior in a very stiff, for example, some Buddhists would believe that our Dhamma is so sublime that it is higher than all other religions, right? And when we would speak in our sort of religious circles, we would call other practitioners or people from other faiths mithya drishtika, right? Which is actually, when you go into the true definition of mithya drishtika, these other practitioners are not mithya drishtika, right? Mithya drishtikas, there's a whole definition where the Buddha defines mithya drishtika. There can be mithya drishtikas, but that doesn't, but simply having another faith or belief system does not make them mithya drishtikas like that, right? It does not make them mithya drishtikas like that. And for example, even though a person who is of another faith can believe in the fact of karma, right? Can believe in the fact of energies that we create and the energies that give result, right? And that is a fact in this sort of colorful world that we live in, right? It is a truly colorful world. It is not black or white, or just black or white. And in that realization, it brings us so much of peace when we realize how colorful and vibrant the world is, right? How colorful and vibrant the world is. And our practice falls upon that inspiration, that we are all different, however, we can all at the same time coexist and live together and love people who are different from what or how we are, right? That is our practice, right? That is our practice. As we take, for example, Sri Lanka today, the people up north are suffering, the people down south are suffering, the people in the east are suffering, the people in the west are suffering. Everyone is suffering. Suffering is universal, right? Even if you would take people in the UK, right? Some people are on one meal a day because they can't afford to eat because of the bills, because of inflation, right? A loneliness, right? Children not speaking to the parents, all of these things. We might, because petty people might be concerned about this color on their skin, but in true reality, there is no difference between you and I. Yes, we are different, but we are so similar and unique and also similar in so many ways. Yeah. So just as we would treat ourselves, we would treat other people. Just as I would not like to be embarrassed in front of others, we do not embarrass other people as well. Right? Just because we care about our egos more than we would care about another's. Right? So drawing from that inspiration that we have derived from the teachings of the Buddha, let us determine to sort of learn from these parts of Dhamma in a way that we would then sort of practice it. All right.
Bhante, one more question, please.
Yes.
Bhante, you mentioned Noble Eightfold Path as the way to Nibbana. But what about the people of other faiths who follow the path? They have Samma Vaca, Samma Kammanta. And I read somewhere about something called Lokottara Sammaditthi, which leads to Nibbana.
Yeah.
So the people of other faith, even though they follow the Noble Eightfold Path, they can't attain Nibbana. Is that right?
Well, yeah. Well, even people of our faith, including people of our faith, if they are unable to understand the notions of supramundane, they too are unable to attain Nibbana. And that's the truth, right? That's the truth, which is the fact that people, whether they are Buddhist or not, here we know, for example, as theory goes, we know, as practice goes, we know, if we are so ingrained within the concept of Buddhism, we will not attain. If we are so ingrained within the concept of being a mother, we will not attain. If we are so ingrained in whatever concept, it deludes, right? Impermanent suffering and non-self is universal, regardless of Buddhist or otherwise. Realization of impermanent suffering and non-self, although found within the Dhamma, is also universal. Right? So we would come across so many born or people who would call themselves Buddhist as well, who would, as explained in the Dhamma, say, gaye aratuwa kapaganna enama. ඒ වුණාට ගහේ කොළ ටික වැටලා තියෙනවා, ගහේ තියෙන ඔය අතු ටිකක් වැටලා තියෙනවා, ඒ ටික කපාගෙන මම මේක අරන් යන්න අරටුව අමාරු වැඩි කියලා ඒ ටික අරන් යනවා. එවැනි මිනිස්සු මේ ලෝකේ there's so many, right, where we are unable to go beyond that sort of concept. Yeah, so that is so. So I would say it is not only sort of any being, if they are not aligned with supramundane, what supramundane is, or what the Aniddukanatma or supramundane is, right, then it is a problem. We will not attain. Right? Which is again to say, that is it. All right, just hold on a moment. Thank you everyone for joining in the session. I'm going to stop the recording now.